In this video we're going to talk about stakeholders, and the reason why we're talking about stakeholders now is they are usually, or some of them are usually involved right at the initiation part of the contract, and so it's useful to keep that in mind. So stakeholders, we've already looked at three of them. There's the main parties, there's the client, there's the consultant, and there's the contractor. But each one of those has within it its own stakeholders. So for example, within the client's organization there will be the accounting department, there will be the operations department, there will be the project management department, all those sort of things. Within the consulting consultants, there would be the different disciplines as well, who might be called upon to provide technical input into what the project should be. So for example, you might be doing a pump station, you decide you need these types of pumps, and you need to consult with the electrical people to find out what type of switchboard, how big it would be for those particular types of pumps. So that's an example of a stakeholder within the consulting organization. And the contractor would also have its own stakeholders too. And those are the ones internal to the project. Later on we'll talk about stakeholders that are outside of the project, outside of those three main parties. So looking at it in a little bit more detail, the client usually has a bank. Now many big projects, especially subdevelopments, they are financed by a bank. The developer doesn't have enough money to finance it by himself, so they'll have to go to the bank and they'll have to take out a loan. Now some developers are really big and they've got their own money. In fact, it's one way of managing their money. Legal advisors, the insurer, real estate advisor, all people giving them advice. The consultant, as I said, have probably got their own sub-consultants in their team, and within the consulting team. A bank, sometimes their insurer, professional indemnity insurance, all that sort of stuff. They would obviously have some input into the riskiness of the design that they're producing. The contractor, many contractors, or medium-sized, small to medium-sized contractors, may not have enough money to actually do the contract works by themselves. They've got to put a lot of money up front. They've got to buy materials, they've got to pay people. They'll get progress payments, but they don't get full payment for the work until it's finished. So there's a bit of a delay, so they've got to get some bridging finance there to tide them over until they've finished the project and they get that final payment. So the bank is really quite important. The bank needs to sort of extend an overdraft to them to do it. And there's the insurer as well. So let's look at the client organization, or the lines of communication in a little bit more detail. There's the client organization, and say this is the accounts department, and this is the operations department, and this might be the another couple of departments, and they might all have requirements from the project works. Within the client organization, there's usually someone called a project sponsor, and they oversee the project. So they are the ones that are championing it. They are the ones that are making sure it gets financed. So they're someone from the senior management level. It could be the owner even. They set objectives, they provide the funding, they provide the resources. In other words, they make sure that the project has what it needs to carry on. They also approve the project. They're the ones that have the final approval and say, yes, this is okay, let's go ahead with it. And so they keep an oversight over the whole thing. They might not be involved in the day-to-day operation of the project, but they're keeping an eye on it on behalf of the client organization. The client project manager. Now these two might be the same person, usually not, but the client project manager is the one that does the day-to-day running of the project, usually a junior person. Now their job is to actually take all these organizational requirements, what these people need from the project, and relay it to the design team. They also need to gather all the background information on the project and relay it to the design team. Now the idea of this is that there's one person from the client organization communicating with the consultant. This gets horribly confusing if each one of these people were talking directly to the consultant. They'd be sometimes conflicting, they'd be adding things to it, they'd be taking things away from it. This gets horribly confusing. So it needs to have one person who's the conduit to the rest of the project team. The client project manager is also providing project information back to the client organisation, progress updates, keeping these people in the loop. These people are all within the client organisation, but they are all stakeholders. They need to be kept informed. You've got the consultant project manager, so he's working for the consulting company. He will be doing the project designs, the project updates, and he'll be communicating those to the client project manager. The client project manager will be giving him the project requirements, the background information, any scope changes. So it's all going that way. And then usually the consultant project manager acts as a conduit between the contractor and the client for the day-to-day operation of it. This guy will still be involved, but usually the day-to-day management is done by that. So instructions, project information going from the consultant to the contractor. The contractor will be progress updates and variation requests. So you can see that's the flow of information, the way it works, and you can see there's these stakeholders here that sort of need to be consulted with. So let's just look at a couple of those leaders. So each of the main parties, I haven't shown it on the previous diagram, but each of the main parties has a project sponsor, which is the senior management representative, provides funding, organisational resources, oversees the project. So I showed you the client project sponsor, but within the consulting organisation there will be a project sponsor. Now he's not called that in the industry, he'd just be the project director or the company director or whatever. But essentially he's doing that thing of making sure that the project team have got what they require to do the work, that they are keeping the client happy, and all that sort of business. And the same with the construction company. They will also have a senior manager or a director who is also making sure that the resourcing is being allocated, that the funding is there, that it's being done properly. So they'll maintain an oversight of the whole thing. So each one of the parties has a project sponsor, although in the industry we don't really call them project sponsors, we call them a director or a project director or a project senior manager or something like that. And then the day-to-day running of it, each party will have a project manager running their part of the project. You'll recall from a few videos back, each one of the main parties has their own little project. You know, the client has the big project, which is to procure the deliverables. The consultant has his project, which is to do the feasibility study and then maybe do the design and then do the monitoring. So he's got 3 projects there. The contractor's got his project, which is to win it, get in the tendering process, and then another project to do the construction. So they've all got little sub-projects within that bigger project, and each one of them has its own project manager. So the project manager basically runs it, initiates the project, plans the project, executes it, monitors and controls it, and closes it. And this is what we're sort of really about on this course, being a project manager. Project sponsor, later on in your career you may well end up being a project sponsor, but for the moment we're all about what this guy here does, what the project manager does. In addition to those stakeholders within the 3 main parties, there are also external stakeholders, also known as, indirect stakeholders. And they are stakeholders not directly involved in the delivery of the project, but who can affect it or can be affected by it. So for example, consenting authorities, they require building consents, resource consents. Most civil engineering projects require permits or consents for their works. There's WorkSafe in New Zealand, who are responsible for health and safety. There's iwi, who are interested in the cultural and environmental issues related to your project, especially if they have some history in that particular area where you're doing the project. Then there's the general community and the neighbours, the people who are going to be directly affected by the noise and the dust and the insects and the extra traffic from the work. And community organisations in the wider community, the social change that's going to happen because of the project, the economics, the environmental issues as well. And then there's national environmental groups such as sometimes Greenpeace, but normally Forest and Bird, who are concerned about protection of environmental areas. Then there's the media and future users as well. So each one of those stakeholders, while they're not directly involved, they are are quite important and should be considered. Sometimes they're consulted with. So project stakeholder management is actually a new knowledge area in PMBOK. And so it's identify the stakeholders, plan how you're going to manage those stakeholders. So in other words, you figure out who are all the stakeholders, internal and external, what information do they need, when is that information going to be provided, who's going to provide it, how you're going to provide it, all that sort of thing. So it's closely linked to the communication plan, which we'll look at later on. And then when the project starts, you sort of manage that stakeholder engagement, you initiate contact with those people, you provide the information that you plan to provide, and you also control it. You make sure that you are that you understand where those people are coming from. So if there's any emergencies, you're onto it really quickly. So it's really useful to look at stakeholders on this graph here. So potential stakeholders and relationships. So power to impact the project and interest in the project. So the power to impact the project is, in other words, can they close you down? So if they can, then they've got high power. If they can't really do all that much, then it's low low power to impact the project. Likewise, if they're not really that interested, they just sort of they're interested in a very small part of it, you know, low interest in the project. Or if they're really interested in how it all goes, it's high. So the client would sit right there. He's got high impact on the project. He can close it down at any time. He's also highly interested in how it goes. But something like a council or WorkSafe, WorkSafe, for example, are just interested in, are you carrying out the project works in a safe manner? That's all they're worried about. They don't worry if you're making a profit or if you're making a loss or if you're achieving quality objectives. All they're concerned about is safety. So it's sort of their interest in the project is low or pretty narrow, but they have the ability to close you down. So they'd be sitting in there. So you need to be providing them with the information they require, all of the information they require, and keep them up to date, because the last thing they want to do is be blindsided. And then you've got some people over here which have low impact, so that would be the neighbours. So they don't have all that much power to stop the project, but they're really interested in what's going on because you're affecting their life every part of the day. So you need to keep them informed. Even though they can't really close you down, it's a matter of politeness, just being a good person, to actually keep them informed, hearing their problems, trying to resolve their problems if you can. And then there's people that sort of aren't all that really interested and have low impact, you know, so that might be, you know, the local community sort of further away or something like that. So monitor them, make sure sort of nothing's going to go wrong there. And so a useful way to manage these people is to keep a stakeholder register, which means that you sort of document the information about the project stakeholders' names, contact details, who to contact, how to contact them, what their expectations and attitudes are, and that helps you to plan the communications. So what you've got here is a list of people, and you know, if you need to contact them or if you need to send out an email to the people saying, you know, hey, we're going to be starting to do some excavation work today, there's going to be a bit of noise and a bit of dust, but this is what we're going to do to mitigate it. So you might sort of try to front foot that, sort of tell them about it, tell them what you're doing, tell them when it's going to be done, and all that sort of business. So you just go to your register here, you pull out the emails, you do an email, and you send them all an email or something like that. So that allows you to sort of know who the people are and how to contact them really quickly. And it's really quite important. Stakeholders, even the ones that don't have much power, they can sort of go to their local politician, and you know, if there's enough complaints, then the politician might step in, and then you do have someone that sort of can close down your project. So it is to the benefit of the project to actually keep in contact with the stakeholders, understand where they're coming from, and try to sort of meet their requirements as much as you can, but obviously within reason.